Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to give it a couple more minutes for a few folks to trickle in. All right, I think we'll just kick things off. We've got about 12 attendees at this point. All right, so my name is Yana. I'm the marketing director at US Analytics. Everyone, welcome today, as I mentioned before. If you're not familiar with US Analytics, we're a leading national EPM and analytics services firm. We refer to ourselves as the Picture Results Company, empowering the finance office to drive strategy and results. Here's a little snapshot of our services and solutions. We have been around for a very long time, over 2 decades. We're very nimble and respond quickly to customer needs. We have over 500 clients we service and have done a lot of, over 1,000 really successful engagements nationally. So we have a lot of experience with EPM and analytics. So today's webinar is really a kickoff of a 3-part series on everything EPM Cloud related. As you know, cloud is all the rage right now, especially after the effects of last year, as companies really aim to become more agile and have access to more reliable and more predictable data faster, resulting in better business decisions for short-term and long-term goals. You've heard the benefits of moving to the cloud. There's no upfront hardware or software costs. There's less pressure on IT, no annual maintenance cost, and more. Today, we'll not only be covering and comparing the differences between cloud migration versus staying on premise, but we'll really take a look at how the planning systems differ. I encourage you to think of questions as we go through the webinar content today, and stick around till the very end because we'll answer all of them live and have kind of an open discussion on all of your questions. I also encourage you after this webinar to go ahead and register for our other 2. The second part of the series will really take a deeper dive into planning. And then the third part of the webinar series will really cover on how to build your own digital first EPM roadmap to migration. So I want to introduce our speaker today. Bobby Ellis is our EPM practice director. Bobby is well versed in the EPM space. He has over 20 plus years of experience and consulting experience with really a strong emphasis on enterprise performance management and really cloud and on-premise. Within our team, Bobby has a hand in every EPM project and throughout every phase of each project. He's very hands-on. So there's really no better subject matter expert that will help ease your concerns about migrating your Hyperion Planning environment to the cloud and answer your pressing tech questions. So here is what we are going to cover today. The major differences between the 2 platforms, sharing migration best practices, and we'll wrap things out with a customer success story relevant to our current discussion.
Thanks, Jenna. Hopefully you're seeing the PowerPoint deck on that I'm presenting now.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, fantastic. So just briefly run through the agenda here. Yana took care of the introductions. I wanted to talk about, start off just to talk about the relevance of this topic, given that, we've been talking about this for a while in the industry. So what's changed? What are some of the key decision points that you should factor in when, if you're making a decision between upgrading to 11.2 versus migrating to the cloud? What are the benefits and drawbacks of each of those approaches, upgrading versus migrating? And then, as Yana mentioned, we'll talk a little bit about one of our recent case studies. So we've been talking about the 11.2 or cloud discussion point for, it seems like a very long time now. That's been the subject of a lot of blog posts from us and others. 11.124 support is ending soon, so you might think a lot of people have already made this decision and it's kind of late in the game to be discussing it. But in talking to clients, what we've found is that given the widespread effects that COVID had on really most industries, a lot of clients essentially had to defer their plans, whatever they had in mind at the beginning of last year, because of the fees that put on funding for upgrade or migration projects like this. And so a lot of clients that we've talked to essentially haven't made a lot of progress since then because it's things are just now starting to, we're seeing some signs of normalcy, and projects like this are able to be funded again. So it's prudent to kind of revisit the conversation, see if anything's changed over the last year, to see if the decision that you may have been thinking about last year is still appropriate now. So just some key decision points or criteria here. Why should you consider moving to the cloud right now as opposed to moving to 11.2? Obviously, no more updates is one of the huge benefits. Literally having no involvement in doing anything more in the way of software upgrades, no major point releases that are time-consuming, disruptive, and expensive. You get to take advantage of Oracle's infrastructure and security expertise. So the security around your EPM deployment is no longer your responsibility, and Oracle is uniquely qualified to handle that. I remember reading about their security policies a few years back, and their data centers actually have the same physical security standards as U.S. embassies overseas. So highly secure data centers. You're able to stay current with all of the new features, again, without having to go through any type of point upgrade process. And, one of the things that's made cloud a lot more compelling recently, Oracle's EPM Cloud, is the significant change that Oracle made to their licensing agreements relatively recently. So previously, it didn't make a sense for a lot of clients that had multiple planning applications where the same user was on more than one of those. You essentially were having to pay twice for those users when you went to the cloud, since the licensing was per pod, per user, instead of just purely per user. So that move to purely per user, and including essentially all of the major products, both the standard and enterprise, it just financially it makes a lot more sense now. There are still reasons why some customers haven't made that move to the cloud yet. So these are some of the reasons that it would be understandable if you're not able to make the move right now. Budget's always a consideration, and there is the one-time cost of doing the migration before you get into that nice, just recurring monthly fee. This next bullet, I think, is less likely now that Oracle's changed their licensing, but in some cases the SaaS cost just exceeded that annual maintenance fee, and so it wasn't justifiable just on that savings alone. Or in some cases, there's still organizations that from an IT strategy standpoint aren't ready for the cloud, although I think those are definitely fewer and further between. Okay, so let's talk about the 11.2 upgrade option. It extends Oracle support. Actually, I think this is through 2032 now. I think they just had a press release, may have been yesterday, that extended it to 2032. It gives you, from a platform or infrastructure perspective, it gives you support for Windows Server 2019 and SQL 2016, so you don't have to worry about the infrastructure itself being unsupported. You don't have to introduce users to a new user interface. It does have the old Essbase, if you will, and if you're using EPMA, Oracle made sort of a last-minute decision not to include that in 11.2, so you have the limited DRM license that you can use in place of EPMA, and Oracle does have a utility to help facilitate the migration of your metadata from EPMA over to DRM. Okay, now what are the considerations for migrating to the cloud? There's definitely some things that you have to consider that you sort of lose, if you will, in migrating to a SaaS model. You can't throw CPU and RAM at poorly written calculations anymore. I think it elevates to an extent the importance of tuning and optimization for things like calculation scripts, large volume exports and imports of data. We've seen clients able to attain very good performance. So these are things that you can definitely overcome. You just have to be a little bit more mindful of making sure what you're releasing out there is optimized. One of the really nice things that Oracle has done, though, to help clients with troubleshooting performance issues is the robust diagnostic information that's available every night when the nightly maintenance runs. It collects a lot of detailed statistics from both the planning layer and the S-base layer to help clients hone in on areas that might be dragging down performance. So just got two examples here in these screenshots. So there's a section there for the top 5 longest running calc scripts that took over a minute. And I've kind of circled there, some of the statistics that are gathered there. So how many blocks were read, how many were updated, if blocks were created. This has been extremely helpful in cases where, clients have had a sort of an unknown, unexplained, or unexpected drop in performance. There's definitely been several occasions where going to this and identifying, for example, rules that are creating a lot of blocks unnecessarily, and being able to go back and then address those specific areas. So even though you don't have access directly to logs and things like that any longer, this Oracle is essentially giving you one better by collecting and parsing all that information, presenting it back to you in some tables and things that are a lot more meaningful than trying to dig through a whole log. So some of the other things that you need to consider is there are no more direct connections to S-base from SmartView or reporting in the cloud. It's the planning provider is what SmartView has to go through. So there are some users that like having that direct connection to S-base, the underlying S-base databases, instead of going through the planning provider. That's no longer a possibility. But we haven't found that to be an issue with any of our clients. Just a preference issue that takes some folks a little bit of time to let go of initially. You're no longer able to query the planning relational repository directly. So I know, especially in some of our larger deployments, there may be jobs that are running and updating information directly in some of the planning tables or extracting information from the planning repository. You can't do that anymore. There are you can still get the relational data out. It's just there's a different way of doing that. And you definitely cannot update the tables directly. The other thing that I just like to point out when clients are considering the migration approach, if you are going to migrate to the cloud, I really encourage you to avoid the lift and shift approach. If that's the approach that you take and you just essentially say, I just want to get what I have in on-prem over to the cloud, you're missing out on a lot of opportunities to reap even more benefits from the migration process than just the technology differences. So in most cases, the clients we've worked with are willing to take that extra time at the beginning for us to look at their deployment with them. A lot of times we can combine or streamline applications, consolidate things into maybe one application with multiple databases. And still able to maintain good performance, and it just provides an overall better user experience. And if you can if you can afford to take even a further step back to look at how your business processes could maybe be adjusted to align better to get better support from the new features. That's where those are the clients that we've had the most positive feedback from, are the ones that have taken the time to look at processes, look at how things, dimensionality and things like that, and actually take the approach of not quite re-implementing, but going a step further than just a lift and shift over to the cloud. Okay, there's some of the deprecated products that are available in on-prem up through 11.124 can still be migrated to the cloud. So you can migrate, if you had the workforce planning module on-prem, you can still migrate those artifacts to the cloud. It's just not going to come over as cleanly as the module-based. But in some cases, the changes to the products are significant enough, like with strategic finance, that there really is not a straight migration path. And then also, dashboards are not available in 11.2 since the simplified interface for on-prem has gone away in 11.2. And so now I wanted to take a little time to talk about some key features that are available only in the cloud. And this list is growing with every monthly update. The gap is already pretty wide, and it just continues to grow. So the module-based planning is available in Oracle Enterprise Cloud EPM. The same 4 modules that were available in on-prem, again with 11.2, Oracle discontinued support for those 4. So while you can still get them to work in 11.2, certainly no updates and no direct support for the specific functionality to those modules. The integration with strategic finance has really been encouraging, and it's evolving. Every month, every quarter. It has the same look and feel now for users as the other planning modules, whereas it used to be completely foreign and not at all integrated with the rest of planning. Oracle just continues to keep improving the enhancement between the strategic, it's called strategic modeling in the cloud, with the other modules. Okay, and again, Enterprise Cloud also now offers the freeform planning option, which is the closest thing that you can get to Essbase in the cloud without going to OAC. So it allows you to migrate a BSO or ASO outline over from on-prem, and you don't have the limitations of certain required dimensions that planning has, like scenario and version, things like that. You can truly do whatever you want with that, the metadata, none of the restrictions that planning has. Okay. Here, some more recently introduced features. I put cell level security first because it's the one that I've been most excited about probably recently. This basically brings cloud EPM security on par with Essbase security filter functionality. So you're now able to define security essentially down to the cell level so that certain dimension combinations are valid for a user and other combinations of those members are not. That was something that's been requested for a long time, and it's something that some of our clients could have used a year or so back. So we no longer have to try to come up with creative ways to accomplish the same thing, since we can now do that directly. Also, the concept of valid intersections is something that a lot of our clients are adopting. So just the ability to say certain combinations of members from dimensions are valid or invalid. For example, if you don't want people entering capital expense data against a customer, you can define all intersections of those accounts with the customer dimension as invalid except for no customer. So things like that, just to make the user experience smoother and avoiding issues that show up, down the road when you're consolidating the plan together. The Groovy scripting language is a huge benefit that not as many clients are taking advantage of yet, but that's definitely growing. It gives you a lot more control over how data is processed within a form, and we've been able to achieve some very significant performance gains by replacing calculation rules with a Groovy equivalent. Okay, and then EPM Automate and the REST API. Again, EPM Automate additional commands are being released for that every quarter, if not more frequently, to allow you to automate so many maintenance tasks, even things like cloning one environment to another. That can be truly lights out and scripted now. Okay, and dashboards. Dashboards 2.0 was a huge improvement from where dashboarding was previously in EPM Cloud. So this is just one example. Next week, we'll have some interactive content for you on Dashboards 2.0 if you join us back for that. But this is just showing an example of things that definitely were not capable in the old reporting engine or charting engine, sorry. So again, we'll get into that more next week, but if for those of you who've played with dashboarding at all in older versions of, say, Onprem, this is definitely light years ahead of what was possible previously. Okay, Auto Predict is also a relatively new feature that is very exciting from my standpoint. It's sort of an enhanced or automated evolution of the predictive planning feature, if you've seen that previously, where you could, within a form, choose some line items to have Oracle do a prediction for you, instead of this being limited to like a single form. What this allows you to do is create prediction models for whole subsets of data, even across queues. So one very compelling use case for this is providing users with a starting point for their budget or forecast. So as you can see in the screenshot, you can define the what historical data is used, or the data that's used to generate the prediction. You can generate multiple cases within one execution. So this is something you can automate, run overnight, and when the users log into the system, instead of starting with current year actuals or last year's budget, they have 3 different cases already pre-populated that they can then just adjust. So it's a very powerful feature that I think we'll just see the capabilities continue to grow. Okay, SmartView, Smart Forms. This is another feature that not a lot of clients know about, but once they find out about it, they're pretty excited. You can essentially create forms from within SmartView. So it's similar to how you would do like an ad hoc analysis. You define your rows and columns and your POV, but then you can also insert like calculated rows, subtotals or percentages. There are over 125 Excel formulas that are supported by this now. Once you define that, and you can save that smart form then back to the EPM repository. So at that point, it's reusable by other users. The EPM Cloud engine takes care of translating the Excel formula to the equivalent S-based calculation that needs to occur, so that users are going to get the same result they get from Excel. And again, this is another one of the items that we'll be showing live next week. But it's a very powerful feature, but not a lot of clients are using it yet. Okay. And again, just some statistics here, just showing you how compelling it is to migrate. This is from Oracle's Value of EPM survey. across clients, and you can see how their clients are saving days on their reporting cycle, the close cycle. They're able to execute scenario and version analysis that they didn't have time for previously. And a lot of clients clients that were already on EPM Cloud when COVID hit, and there was this increased need to do so much more scenario and version modeling, were able to do that because they had those features available to them. So just a recap of some of the benefits there. Obviously, I won't go through this in line by line, but this just shows you some of the, how many differences there are now between EPM Cloud Planning and the on-prem version. And if you sign up to get the deck after this, you'll be able to read through this in more detail, but this list just continues to grow with every quarterly release. So I'll just talk briefly about one of our success stories. We worked with McAfee on a EPM on-prem to cloud migration that also we were able to combine with some process improvements. So one of their challenges was their users are spread across 6 continents, but some of their on-prem processes ran so long that the system was effectively unusable for a lot of the international users because they had to stay out of the system for allocations and things like that to be running. They also, as part of this initiative, decided to let us help them take on the fact that they also had different revenue models that were in place across the company, that so there were no consistent assumptions that were being enforced. And we were able to help them redesign their planning and forecasting process, come up with a strategy that would work for the entire organization, building in some flexibility for differences where that made sense. And the feedback from them was overwhelmingly positive. They had much better insight into the revenue forecasting and why actuals weren't coming out to be what they thought based on the forecast. So they were able to just come up with a consistent process across the organization. Okay, Jana, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Bobby. All right, well, I want to open this up to all of the questions. If anyone has some questions to ask Bobby specific to, again, cloud migration, staying on-prem, how that affects your systems. I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes to populate them. I'm monitoring them right now. And then also, while we're at it, in the chat, I've posted 2 links, one of them to our part 2 webinar and then our part 3 webinar. So part 2 will be same time next Thursday, and then part 3 is June 3rd. So just the following week. Brian is asking, current on-prem and have ASO reporting queue built off of an Essbase Studio model star schema. What would be a possible solution to replace this if we went to cloud and if we stayed on-prem?
Okay, so yeah, hopefully I caught all that. So yeah, if you're using Essbase Studio to read from dimension tables and a fact table and build the Essbase cube, essentially based on that, one approach would be to create a free-form planning application in the cloud. Again, to not have the restrictions on, so you have whatever dimensions you want, and then use the EPM integration agent, which allows you to read from on-prem relational data sources and build the metadata and data then through data management. One of the things that I'm seeing more clients do now is embrace the approach of using data management to update both metadata and data, and that would be the closest analogy to an Essbase Studio build like that. The only drawback is the configuring drill back options are a little trickier. So if you're using the drill back with Essbase Studio, there are just some nuances to enabling that so that it performs similarly.
Brian, let us know if you need some further clarification on that. And also, Bobby, on your little dashboard, there's a little section that says questions. If you just click the down arrow, you might be able to see them unless it just shows the presenters. Let me know.
I don't see a section on mine that says questions for some reason.
No problem, no problem. I'll just read them. Oh, Brian followed up with on 11.2.4, can we still use Studio?
I believe Studio should still be available to you in 11.1.2.4. It's not available in 11.2. We were, trying to do something like that with 11.2. We'd probably, I would suggest looking at something with SQL dimension building load rules and a SQL data load rule to go straight from an on-prem relational source to build your S-base cubes. And hopefully I got that right. If I didn't, we could also, happy to have a follow-up one-on-one call if you'd like to talk through those in a little bit more detail and bring in one of my EDMCS folks to talk more about, some of the other options for having those automated metadata builds in the cloud.
Thank you, Bobby. Okay, next question is, can we get the copy of the presentation? Yes, that will be emailed out with the replay to the webinar probably by Monday. So expect that in your inbox. And then specifically to the technology, can you talk a little bit more about Groovy scripting, please?
Yeah, so the Groovy scripting, and there's so much you can do with the Groovy scripting. It's more robust than the what you can do with just the calc manager rules in terms of like manipulating the data after the user's done updating it, but prior to it getting submitted back to the database, you can do calculations with it that are much faster than the run on save rule equivalent. Also, you can push data between cubes, and we found that we can come up with Groovy scripts that push data over to another cube much faster than, say, a smart push definition. So there's, and maybe we can put additional slides next week in our in that deck, and I can go into some more detail and show you some examples of where we've leveraged Groovy. But again, calculations and smart pushes are areas where we see that used a lot.
Okay, great. Let's see, Vlad is asking, end users like SmartView to build quick reports. What is the replacement, if any, for it?
So SmartView is still alive and well. It's just the only difference is, and this nuance isn't even significant to a lot of clients, but we have some clients that have users that want to go directly to S-base. In Onprem, you were able to connect to the planning provider or the S-base provider. You have to go through planning now. So users can still have the same robust ad hoc ability that they had previously. So they're not losing anything there really. And Oracle has gotten SmartView to the point now where most users never have to log into the web. I mean, you can do everything right from SmartView now. Doing calculations, saving forms back to the planning repository, even viewing the results of consolidation or calculation jobs. You can view the job console from SmartView.
Okay, great. The next question that we need a little bit more clarification on is some more detail on the licensing aspect.
Yeah, so Oracle, when EPM Cloud first came out, if you wanted to have FCC and PBCS, and you had users that needed to use both, you had to essentially pay for that user twice. You had to pay for their PBCS subscription license and their FCC. And it got worse from there. If you had 3 planning applications that user needed to be in, then you were essentially paying for them 4 times. So what Oracle did is they did away, for the most part, with the differences in the two, like the licensing by module. So now there's just 2 options, Cloud Standard and Cloud Enterprise. And there are some some features that are limited to only the enterprise version, like transaction matching for ARCs, Groovy, and I'll be happy to put a title or a table, sorry, in next week's deck to show this. But those are essentially the differences. You get now, pretty much all the products with a few restrictions under both. Your options for doing like the free form and things are limited in standard. What I've seen recently is most of our clients aren't even considering standard. They're just going right to enterprise because you basically pay one monthly fee per user, and that user can use every single product that's included with, standard or enterprise.
Awesome. Thank you, Bobby. Vlad is asking, Dashboard 2.0, is it like OBIE, better or worse?
It's a difficult question because, it depends on the use case. There are certain types of analytic capabilities that I wouldn't try to do in EPM Cloud. I mean, OBIE, I think, is always going to have a much more robust feature set than the dashboarding and reporting capabilities that are embedded within EPM. And I think that's just kind of by design based on what each product is intended to address. It's a lot closer to, you can make dashboards that look, a lot more like an OBIE, but certainly I don't think Oracle intends for this to be a replacement, but it is a huge step forward in the dashboarding within the EPM Cloud. So I hope that answers the question. There's still certain use cases where we would direct clients to a combined option of leveraging both if they were, for example, trying to combine a lot of EPM Cloud data with maybe some data that's sitting in OAC or coming from like an on-prem relational source.
Vlad, I hope that answered your question. If not, again, we can follow up in more detail. He had another follow-up question real quick. So he asked, data migration between apps and other data sources, ODI, FDMEE, or what? I'm assuming he's asking kind of what the options are between apps for migration purposes.
Yes, and I'm going to answer it based on the assumption that you're asking about in the cloud. So feel free to type back if that's not the case. But for most deployments, you're wanting to transfer data between cubes or even between pods. So I'd say between pods, data management is typically what we would use. There are other things we can do to script downloads and uploads with EPM Automate, but in most cases, data management does enough to handle the data transfers like from one pod to another. You can also use data management to do transfers between cubes within an individual pod. And there were certain use cases where that's made sense for our clients. And then I'd say if you're talking about on-prem, like loading from an on-prem source into EPM Cloud, it would depend. You can either go the flat file approach. A lot of clients don't like to have the data exist even if it's a temporary file that gets deleted immediately. So we have options like around the EPM integration agent in those cases.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bobby. I think that's it for the questions. Those are some great questions that y'all asked, very, on par with what we're discussing and detail oriented. So again, definitely thank you for joining today. We hope you found the content valuable. Want to encourage y'all again to join us next week and the following week as we dive kind of further into cloud and planning and really kind of how to build your digital first EPM strategy roadmap. If we need to, we can always schedule a complimentary assessment or just a complimentary call to further help y'all. We're here to serve your needs, so just let us know what those may be. And there's also a lot of free resources on our website. You can simply go to us-analytics.com, and then under our resources tab, and then we have tons and tons of blogs. So definitely encourage y'all to check those out in the meantime. So this really pretty much concludes our webinar. Oh, Bobby, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say if anybody is interested in a one-on-one follow-up call, to discuss things in more detail. I promise you'll have at least that first call with no salesperson on the call.
I think that's important to note. No pressure.
Yeah.
We're really here to, like I said, serve y'all and really give you the information and the tools you need for whatever you're considering in your next upgrade or migration. Yeah, like Bobby mentioned, no pressure. So if no one else has any other questions, again, we'll just conclude this webinar. The replay and the presentation deck will be sent out. And then in the chat, you can find just real quickly the links to register for part 2 and part 3. So appreciate everyone joining again today. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your Thursday and a great weekend. Thank you.